Hi everyone, thank you very much for stopping by and returning to the old world. I've done a couple of videos recently looking at how units have improved following the release of the errata and FAQ document by Games Workshop for Warhammer The Old World. I've looked so far at Empire State Troops and I've looked at Empire Greatswords. Although infantry as a whole have seen improvements, not every unit has. And I think it would be good to turn our attention to a unit that's been hit with a nerf stick a little bit and been brought down in its lethality and in its usefulness. And this is a unit that was quite a lot loved by Orc and Goblin players. It is, of course, the Night Goblin mob. Why was it toned down? Well, I suspect the fact that you quite often had an Orc and Goblin force with a big block of Night Goblins. So we're talking 70, 80, maybe even 90 Night Goblins armed with short bows, armed with the spider banner to give them poison attacks, being pretty much a menace. Even without the spider banner, a unit of 30 could be a proper pain with its attending fanatics. So let's have a look at the rules that have changed that are relevant to this conversation. Obviously, you've got the rules around infantry changing. So this means a unit of infantry that's not making a charge gets to fight with a fighting rank 2 deep or rather than 1D, so effectively doubling the number of models you'd expect to see in a melee. We've also seen changes, the introduction of the parry rule. So if your infantry is armed with hand weapon and shield, they get +1 to their armor save. If you outnumber your opponent, you've also got the option of +1 pip to your combat resolution score. As an aside, it should be noted that units with close order now need a unit strength 10 to get there. It's not really a problem most of the time for Night Goblin mobs because they're generally so big. We've talked about these in other videos, but there's other changes that are relevant as well. So there's changes to the way missile fire works. So if you're firing at a large target, you're not shooting literally everything you've got into that unit. So giants and dragons aren't going to be on the receiving end of all 70, 80, 90 shots. That number is being pared down. We've also seen a change to the way that poison works. So whereas before if you rolled a 6 to hit, that hit automatically turned into a wound. Now you get +2 to your wound roll. It's still quite nice, it's still quite useful, but we'll go on to some of the maths in a moment. It's not looking as powerful. I have seen arguments, I will say, that said actually there is a bonus to this in that you can now try and combo effects. So magical effects which give units additional armor penetration, armor bane, stuff like that become useful because you're not skipping the roll to wound phase anymore. So that can actually make it easier to get through enemy armor and stuff once wounds start to take effect. Finally, there is a change to the fanatic rule. So fanatics now can't be released when a unit is in march column or fleeing. So what you can't do is form your Night Goblins up into a massive march column, send them thundering up the table, possibly aided with moving twice if you get the right spell off, to put them in the heart of your opponent's force, and then at the start of your opponent's turn, release 3 fanatics into their midst. Each of those fanatics, if it gets into an enemy unit, is doing D6 strength 5 hits at AP -3. That's a really solid counter to a small unit of elite troops with a lot of armor, and knights basically really don't like being hit by fanatics. So there's a recap anyway around rule changes. Let's have a look at the Night Goblins themselves. So what is it you get with a Night Goblin? Well, a Night Goblin, weapon skill 2, ballistic skill 3, strength toughness 3, initiative 3, 1 attack, 4 leadership. Pretty poor stat line, but only costing 3 points. And they come in their pants equipped with a hand weapon and a shield. So you are looking there at a 6-up save off the bat, against missile fire for the shield, and a 5-up save in combat because of the hand weapon shield combo. They do have some options, so you can give them thrusting spears for a point, or you can give them short bows, which importantly replaces the shield. There is no light armor option. So if you equip a unit with short bows, any damage they take is going straight through. There are no saving throws to be had. The unit also has access to netters. Netters, really useful. When you're in combat, you roll a d6. On a 2-up, the enemy unit is entangled. This is one enemy unit, I should say, that you're engaged with. So if you're engaged with multiple foes, choose wisely. If you're successful, that entangled unit has a -1 modifier to its strength characteristic. Really useful for toughness 3. And as an aside, I think maintains usefulness, particularly if we're going to see a rise of basic infantry in the game. But we'll come back to that. Fanatics we've talked about as well, so they'd be included. Now, I've mentioned that it was pretty commonplace to see very, very big units of Night Goblins in competitive play. I've never done that. I was running Unit 40, Unit 30, because quite frankly, I couldn't bring myself to pay another 40 Night Goblins to give me that unit of 80 for all of those poison attacks. So whilst the numbers are somewhat pared down, I have used the unit I was taking for the basis of my calculations. What have I found with the difference to the unit with the spider banner before and after the errata? Well, to a certain extent, it depends how you're moving with your mobs. So with volley fire, you can get an awful lot of shots off because you've got your front rank firing and then you've got half of preceding ranks. I used to go 11 wide because you've got that odd number rounding up, so it maximised the number of shots. So I used to form up 11, 11, 7. So that gave me 11, 2 ranks of 6 a unit, rank of 4, so 27 potential shots if I stood still. However, big however here, the range of the short bow is only 18 inches, so you're going to need to move forward, and you're also going to be wanting to get forward to get your fanatics into a position where they're actually going to achieve something. This does mean for most turns you're going to be getting an awful lot less shots. What off? Probably just the 11 from that front rank. When it comes to shooting at long ranges, typically you're going to be shooting at pretty long range, only having that 9-inch short range window. The good news is you've got a weapon that's quick to fire, so you're not having move and shoot penalties, but you are having long range penalties. So realistically, you're hitting on a 5 or a 6. Best case scenario with this unit of 40 and you're doing the full volley fire thing, what does it look like? Well, against toughness 3, you're not really seeing a huge amount of difference. You used to be hitting wounding automatically, I should say, with those 6s to hit. So actually, the difference here is pretty negligible. So under the current poison rules, you're looking at about 6 wounds. Under the old poison rules, you're looking at 6.75 wounds, so really negligible difference. And without poison at all, 4.5. So there's definitely a drop-off there. If we're looking at toughness 4, we're looking at 6 wounds under the old regime, 4.5 wounds, so a bit of a drop-off there under the new rules, and 3 wounds without using poison. This is obviously all before armor saves take into effect. Toughness 5, we've gone from seeing 5.75 wounds to 3.75 wounds against a non-poison of 1.5, and toughness 6, 5.25 wounds down to 3 wounds, and again that 1.5 ratio for not having any poison at all. So there's definitely still play, I think, in poison. There's definitely a difference between not having it, certainly at higher toughnesses, and having it. But we are talking, a unit of 40 doing a couple of wounds. And that does beg the question of, is 35 points a good price to pay for that? We can also see there's a real downgrade, particularly at those higher toughnesses. So for toughness 5, 5.75 down to 3.75 wounds. That's a couple of wounds you're not doing. Same again for toughness 6, so 5.25 down to 3. That's a real degradation. Now, I don't think all is lost, however, for the humble Night Goblin armed with a short bow. Here's the reason why. There's a lot of conversation at the moment around use of core infantry, whether it be your Empire State troops, whether it be your Bretonnian men-at-arms, whatever that might be. Now, a lot of this stuff, let's face it, it's not really high toughness, it's not really high strength. So we're also looking at units that may want to stand their ground, they want to grab objectives and stand there. So a unit that wants to stand just outside of charge range or to offer a tempting target to pull someone off of an objective, that's also able to pump in a lot of firepower, well, actually that becomes a bit of a nuisance and actually offers a slightly different dynamic. At the lower toughness end, we're not seeing a real material difference in the rules for poison, in the amount of impact it's going to do. So that does rather beg the question. If I, as someone trying to hold some ground, and I've got a big unit of infantry, do I really want a unit of missile troops stood opposite me, not having to go anywhere, and just whittling me down, ready for the more elite combat unit to then be able to go in, having broken the back of my static res? I wouldn't say it's definitely the play. I wouldn't say that it's a really strong angle, but it is something that still, I think, breathes a little bit of life into these Night Goblin mobs. The netters, they're still really useful, because if we do end up in a clash of core infantry, yes, not having shields, not having any light armor options, none of that is painful for Night Goblins. They're going to drop in large numbers. But you can reduce your opponent's strength by 1. So if they're suddenly strength 2, they're needing 5s to wound you, which really is going to help stay around. Although your weapon skill 2 means they're going to be hitting on 3s at a very, very minimum. The Fanatics circling around, potentially, yes, they're not as good against big blocks of infantry. They're not going to do enough to really rip one of those units apart, but they're still going to have a bit of sway. And that's before we think about the support options. So Goblins do have some fantastic spell options. Itchy Nuisance, reducing someone's toughness by 1. Again, really helpful. So those higher end toughness things are starting to get a little bit weaker. You're starting to get a little bit more poison damage into those with that +2 to roll. Or even if you're just trying to work your way through a unit of regular infantry, that regular infantry that goes from toughness 3 down to toughness 2, and suddenly these shots you're hitting, on 5s and 6s, but you're wounding on 3s and 2s. That's going to be a lot of shots to deal with that can cause quite a bit of a mess. So overall, I think not all is lost for the Night Goblin mob. I know people are starting to now think maybe spears are the way forward, because you get to fight in that extra rank, so 3 ranks. So a unit that's, let's say, 10 wide is going to be getting off 31 attacks. It's going to have a bonus to its initiative if it's charged, or, of course, because they're armed with shields and hand weapons still with their thrusting spears, they could choose not to use thrusting spears in the first round of combat to get the parry save up, so a 5-up armor save. I'm not sure that's necessarily great, depending on what you're fighting with Night Goblins, because they don't have access to the light armor. If it was a 4-up armor save, then I think that's always going to be good, because there's apart from charging lances, and if you're being charged by lances, I suppose there's not going to be probably as many attacks coming in, but having a 4-up or something that's just reduced to 5-up for most of it, that's half to a third of your casualties being discounted. It's really handy. There, I can see why people are doing that, but of course, if you've already built 80 Night Goblins, 100 Night Goblins, 120 Night Goblins, and you've given them bows, you're probably not going to want to rip off all those arms and to start giving them spears. So I think it is definitely worth having a bit of a play around with how we can get these models on the field in a slightly different role to adapt to the new conditions without having to modify the work we've already put in. So that's just my thoughts on the Night Goblin, certainly in relation to the build relying on short bows and the spider banner. Yeah, it's definitely weakened. I think there's probably still ways of using it. Is it the auto pick it always was? Probably not. But I think with other changes as well, the Orcs and Goblins, there's a lot of thought to be given to how best to use these. Frenzy, if we're looking wider, obviously taking a bit of a pounding. Yes, impetuousness isn't as bad. Doesn't really give you any advantages though. Frenzy only helps if you are on the charge. So yeah, I think there's a lot of restructure needed when it comes to thinking about army lists for the Orcs and Goblins. Anyway, that's enough waffle for me on this topic. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope you found this analysis useful. Do consider the usual like and subscribe if you have done. It's the best way of helping a small channel and costs only a couple of moments of your time. Subscribing, obviously giving you the best information around when a new video drops. Thank you once again for listening. I am Return to the Old World. Have a great day.